Hello, hello. It is that time again. This podcast has made me realize how fast a week goes by. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Tuesday already. I have to get this recorded to get it up tomorrow. So hello, welcome back. Thanks again for listening. My headphones feel really big. So I decided that after sharing Capri's birth story last week that I would continue on and share post-birth with Capri because, as you probably know, Capri has quite the journey. She's gone through a lot, and we've gone through a lot with her. I hope that I can get through this. I will get through this. Hopefully I'm not too emotional. So, again, I'm just going to start with a disclaimer for anyone who's listening. This is a medical trauma story. So if any of that, like loss, child loss, I'm going to talk about we went through some really scary things, and it could be a trigger for someone, I'm sure, who's gone through maybe something similar. And so I just want to share that before I start. I will be just sharing in detail what we went through with Capri, and there is going to be, kind of that topic in there. So let's jump right in. I gave birth to Capri. She was perfect, beautiful. We were so happy. And then at about 2 weeks old, I noticed something was off. Something in my gut told me she was struggling. But I think if you've been a parent to a newborn, it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know if they have a cold, if they're colicky, if they are just trying to adapt to being outside of the womb, or if it is something serious. And I think it's such a struggle for us to try and figure that out because we don't want to overreact, right? And we feel like we are if we go to the clinic and they tell us like, oh, she's colicky, yada, yada, yada. And then we in our gut. So I'm just going to I guess I'll get into that. So anyway, I just noticed at 2 weeks, something was off. We were really struggling. She just never seemed to be happy. She kind of got a little bit of like a cold, I guess you could say, runny nose, things like that. And then on top of it, she just wasn't happy. And so it's September, right? So like RSV is starting and everything like that. So I'm already paranoid. And so I take her into the clinic just to be safe. They did swabs. They did the tests for everything, like viral stuff, RSV, everything like that. Well, of course they do a COVID test. And so they do the nose swab, and I don't know if it's required, but they went so far up her nose with that swab. I cringed so hard, and she screamed, and her nose started bleeding, like she had a bloody nose. And so anyway, we leave that appointment. They tell us it's just like she didn't test positive for anything. And so I'm like, okay, we should be happy. It's just a cold. So we go home, and her nose was bleeding an abnormal amount. And I just had this anger in me, I'm going to be honest, towards, I don't know. I was just so angry. I'm like, why did they do it so hard? Like, this child is bleeding. And so anyway, I sent a picture to her pediatrician of her nosebleed. It just kept bleeding and bleeding. And I was like, is this normal? And they're like, yeah, it's normal. For them to maybe have a little bit of a bloody nose after, give it another day or two. And I was just like, okay, well, okay. So eventually, I think it was 3 days later, her nose finally stopped bleeding. And looking back, that was our first sign. Okay. But we don't know it just stinks because when you've been in this position, you don't start connecting dots until it's later on and too late, right? And so that, looking back, was there was a reason for that. There was a reason for that terrible nosebleed. We'll get into that. So that was like our first sign. But anyway, so then we get home and things just get worse over the next 2 weeks. And you guys, if you guys remember, if you were following me then, I would come on Instagram so defeated, so frustrated, because I just kept saying like, she's not comfortable. Now she's puking. And then at 3 weeks old, she would get to the point where like she would eat and then she would projectile vomit all of her milk on the floor. And she would scream and she would cry and she was so uncomfortable. She wouldn't sleep in her bassinet. Tyson and I had to hold her in order for her to sleep. So we were exhausted. The nights were so long. And it just was like, it was a really hard time. And so anyway, I kept contacting her pediatrician, the nurses through her chart, and I'm just like, she's puking, something's not right. And they said, it sounds like she has a milk intolerance because I was breastfeeding, and they're like, cut out dairy for 14 days. Or like, they said cut out dairy completely. But it could take 14 days for her to adjust to that because it could be like in your system, in her system, everything like that. And I was like, okay, but something in my gut told me it wasn't that. And so obviously I listened to them and I cut out dairy, but I'll never forget I think it was like 3 or 4 days after I'd cut out dairy, my gut just told me like, it's not, like something else is wrong. So I called her pediatrician office again. I can remember this day vividly. And I was looking out our bedroom window and I was holding, I'm already going to get emotional. Oh, this might be a hard podcast. And I remember looking out our bedroom window and I'm on the phone and I'm holding her on my chest. And I'm trying to tell them, like, I feel like it might be, I don't know what's going on. Like, and then, I just didn't feel good about the whole puking thing. I called them back and I'm like, her puking is like a lot. Like it is not a spit up. It is like a projectile vomit. And I don't feel good about how much she's puking and the way she's puking. And she's puking up every bottle. And I could just tell she was struggling. And so I told the nurse and she said, okay, well, we think you need to give her more time with the milk. And I hung up and Tyson was standing behind me like a ways. And I turned around and I just started sobbing. And I said, something's just not right. And I just remember feeling so frustrated because I don't know. I was just so frustrated and scared. And I just wanted my baby to be happy and comfortable, and she wasn't. And so I let it be. And then I think it was like the next day or 2 days later, she started to look, her color was really bad. It was almost like she looked gray and pale and yellow. She had like a weird color to her. And my gut started churning again. And I remember like sending pictures, and I would like take pictures of her next to my face to see if it was just my eyeballs, like, overthinking it, or if like her skin color was off. And when I did that, I was like, oh my God, her skin looks like, her color is so bad. And so I sent like a picture to my sister, and I was just like, does her coloring look weird? And my sister's like, yeah, it does look like a little, like she looks kind of gray. And I was just like, okay. Mind you, this is a Friday evening, I think it was a Friday evening. The clinics weren't open. That's what I'm getting at. And so I remember this vividly. I get on Instagram stories, and I remember getting on there and saying, and I was just sharing with you guys, like, I'm going to make an appointment on Monday just to check like her jaundice levels, because she was yellowish, she was grayish. I didn't love her color. And I was like, I'm just going to have them look at her again. And so I had just gotten done sharing that on Instagram. It was like 4 p.m. I shared that on I think it was like 5 o'clock. I know I couldn't get her to the clinic by then. So I was like, on Monday, I'm going to take her in. And so, I had already decided on Monday, I'm taking her in, I'm making an appointment. They're going to look at her again. And I'm going to like force them to check her jaundice levels. And an hour later is when our world turned upside down. Tyson and Creed had just left. They went to like go to the grocery store or something. They had just pulled out of the driveway, and I took her in on the changing table to change her diaper. And I looked down at her, and her right arm and her right leg started twitching they were twitching together. And it was almost like she kind of like had some bubbles coming out of her mouth. And instantly my reaction was like, this is a mini seizure. She's having a seizure. I quick call Tyson. I tell him, get home. Capri's having a seizure. We have to go to the ER. So he comes home. I have her in my arms. I am just in pure panic. I have her in my arms, and I knew my natural instinct was like, we just need to get there as soon as possible. And so being from a small town where it's like all volunteer, ambulance, firefighters, everything like that, I knew it would be a little bit until we would have an ambulance come to us. So my natural instinct was, let's get in the car, let's get going, and I'll call on the way. And so Tyson throws Creed like in the car, and I actually, like, full transparency, I sat in the back seat and held her because I was not going to put her in a car seat, like, with her having a seizure. So I sat in the back holding her, and Tyson gets on, like, it's kind of like, I don't want to call it, like, an off-road. But anyway, so he gets on the road, and I'm like, drive as fast as you can. I'm going to call the ER. So I call the ER, and I tell them, and I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know we're going to be coming in. My daughter is 1 month old. She was 1 month old that day. And I said, she's 1 month old. She's having a seizure. And I said, I don't know if we should like call an ambulance to meet us. Like, you know what I mean? Because we were already on the way to the hospital. It's a 30-minute drive. And so I'm like, is there any way that you can have like an ambulance meet us in the next town? And she was like, yes, I will do that. So we drove, and then an ambulance met us literally just on the road. Like, we pulled over, Capri and I jumped in the ambulance, and we took off. And this part frustrates me. Basically, they shut the lights off on the ambulance, and we were not rushing. And at the time, I was just like, okay, maybe this isn't like maybe she, like, I don't know. I was just trusting that they were like, you know, this isn't as big as an emergency as I thought. I don't know. So anyway, Tyson texts me. He's behind us. And he texts me, he goes, everything must be okay. They shut the lights off. And I remember thinking, like, we don't feel like we're driving very fast. It took forever to get there, and we were not driving, like, as fast as you would envision an ambulance driving in an emergency. And I'm like, well, she's still, like, kind of out of it. And so anyway, we get there. We get to the ER, and I remember they obviously needed to. No, the first thing they do is a CT scan. So Tyson carried her back with the doctor, and they took her back to the CT scan. And oh my God, I'm just getting sick thinking about this. So then we're in the ER. I'm going to try. We get to the ER, and I'm holding her on the bed after Tyson brings her back from the CT scan. And she starts having seizures in my arm. Full-blown seizures, like 10 times worse than what happened on the changing table. She completely was having like an out-of-body experience, completely stiff, shaking. And I'm holding her as she's trying to get through them. And I'm sobbing. And it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And so anyway, they hook her up to an IV. So on top of that, they're trying to get this 7-pound baby. They're trying to get an IV in her, which was hell. Excuse my language, but it just was. And they're poking her. She's literally not even crying because she's just so, yeah. And so they give her a medicine to try and stop the seizures, and it helped. And so that was good. Cause like as she's having seizures in my arm, all I can think about is like it damaging her brain as they're happening. And so it was good to see that the seizure medicine helped. So then so mind you, like, we're not at a hospital, a big hospital to where, like, it's a good hospital, but, like, it's not the size, like, we don't have a NICU or anything like that. And so the ER doctor that was there, he came back and he gave us the news that she had a severe brain bleed. And that's why she was having seizures. And he looked at us and he just goes, I think she needs to be flown on. And I looked at him and I said, yes, please get her there as fast as we can. And he looked at me and you could tell it was just a huge sigh of relief for him. Like, bless his heart. But I think I can speak for every doctor out there. Just because you're a doctor, pediatricians are specialized in babies. And so you could just tell that this guy wanted her out of his possession. You know what I mean? And I don't blame him. Like, he wasn't a pediatrician. He knew that he could not do the things that, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but he was just like, she needs to be there, not here. And so they called the helicopter and he said, we need to sedate her for the ride. And so they asked Tyson and I to step out so they could put the breathing tube in and put her under. And so they did that, and the helicopter got there and we got to tell her. So we weren't allowed to go. So one thing I was really nervous about was, like, I knew as her mom that I should have wanted to be by her at all times. And, like, that I would have wanted to be in the helicopter. But I was so scared to leave Tyson and make him drive an hour by himself in the state that we were in. And I also didn't want to be trapped next to her, not knowing what would happen without Tyson. So actually it was kind of like an answered prayer when they told us that, like, we're sorry, like, you guys can't go in the helicopter because with a baby, we need extra care. And so, like, the weight limit is too much with the extra staff. And so you guys are just going to have to drive. And it was kind of like, it made that decision for me because I remember stressing, like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should be there. I didn't know if I should be there as a mom or there as a wife. And then also, like, what I could handle. And so we, they load her up, we get in the car, and we take off. And obviously, like, we're trying to go as fast as we can because we don't want them to we would love to get there at the same time that they got there, but they're going in an airplane, we're going in a car, and it's an hour. So we go. Worst freaking drive of my life. I think it's like 10 p.m. at this point. And I call my family, I call my parents, I tell them what's happening. They were actually out to eat and they dropped everything and they took off and they beat us to the hospital. They were there waiting when we got there. And so we sat and we waited for her to arrive. And I just remember this guy was probably like, this woman. But we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And I'm just like, I kept looking over top of us to see if I could see the helicopter coming. And I never saw it the whole hour drive. And I was so nervous. I was like, did something happen? Like, why are we not seeing them? We should have seen them fly over us. And I never saw it. And that made me so nervous. And I just remember just like looking and looking and looking the whole drive. I just kept looking for this helicopter with her in it. And we never saw it. And so when we arrived, I quick went up to like the front desk and I was like, can you see if the helicopter made it? And they were just like, yeah, it's like 10 minutes out. And I'm just like, so then right then I'm like, did something happen? Like, how did we beat them? Everything like that. So anyway, when she got there, they take her like obviously through the ER and everything like that. And then they got her up to the PICU floor and we get there and yeah, I'll never forget seeing her like that. And then so me and my parents and Tyson walk into the room and she's in there and the doctor comes in right away and he pulls Tyson and I to a private room on the side and he just like explained to us, oh my gosh, the fact that I haven't even gone through like the worst part of this is terrible. I don't know if this was a good idea. I thought maybe it would just be like not as hard as I was thinking, but so much trauma. And so anyway, we get into the room with his doctor. He explains to us like she has a severe brain bleed and like her clotting numbers were off the charts. He told us that they've never seen clotting numbers this bad, like out of normal range, and that in order for them to put a drain in, like an EVD in to release the blood and the pressure that was building up in her brain, they would have to get her clotting numbers in normal range before they can do that. Otherwise she would like bleed out. And he said, and this is where he told us that she wasn't going to make it. I mean, he didn't say she's not going to make it, but he told us, he said, I'm sorry, there's nothing else we can do. And he had told us, like, we've never seen clotting numbers like this. And we gave her something that could try and clot the numbers, but like, you could just tell the look in his eyes that he was telling us that she wasn't going to make it. And he just kind of like looked at us and shook his head, and that was like the only way of saving her was to get that drain in. And so they gave her what they could. And I'll never forget, my mom asked the doctor, she said, so at this point, how bad do you think that her brain has been damaged? And he looked at us and he goes, there's no way to tell. And he goes, he just basically said, like, there's no way to tell right now. And so then he left and we obviously just broke down. And I'll never forget Tyson saying through his tears and sobbing
He was like, I'm not going to bury her. I'm not putting her in the ground. You guys, it was the worst 24 hours of our life. And this is, I think I've made comments like, when you've lived through, I truly feel like we lived 24 hours of losing a child, because in that 24 hours to us, she was gone. And I know that's terrible to say, but we had accepted that. We had been told that. And I remember hours had gone by, and I went and sat on Tyson's lap, and I just started sobbing, and I said, I just want to go to sleep and never wake up. And he said, Hailey, I wish I could tell you that it's going to be okay, but I don't think it's going to be okay. And anyway, so on top of it, we're waiting. It's just a waiting game at this point to see if anything changes. And on top of it, she had, we didn't know this, we didn't see these, but they had pointed out to us that on her back, there was 2 spots. They were just like right in line with each other, like kind of on her spine. There were 2 tiny like bruises. And they pointed them out to us when they must have seen, I'm assuming they saw them when she went through the ER at the children's hospital, because they probably like evaluated everything, like evaluated her and everything from head to toe. And they pointed those out to us. And I was just like, I've never, like, I didn't notice those. But then again, like, as a newborn, it's like you don't often see their back, if that makes sense, like naked. Like when you actually think about it, because I was like trying to recall, I'm like, I don't even know the last time like that I looked at her bare back. Because like if she's on the changing table, she's laying on her back. In a bath, she's on her back. When she's upright, she's got like clothes on. So I just told him, I'm like, I didn't know those were there. And so then with those and the brain bleed, they start to question us, because obviously they were trying to find, aside from like the clotting numbers being off, they didn't know if there was like a reason for the brain bleed, I guess, or something like that. Like obviously we're thinking like what caused the bleed, right? And so then next thing you know, mind you, we're still in the worst stage of our life. And all of a sudden, Tyson and I are being pulled into rooms as we are sobbing. I'm at a rock freaking bottom, okay? I can't stop crying. My life is over. And on top of it, we're being pulled into rooms, being questioned. Cops, investigators, CPS. And I get it, because this is something that unfortunately does happen, is where they get involved and they like, how do I say this? Do you get what I'm saying? Like sometimes it is, they do, I don't even know what I'm trying to like say. Like I get why they have to do that, right? Like there's instances where children are abused and they end up in that position. And so they're doing protocol, right? But coming from parents who were trying to process that they were losing their 1-month-old baby, and then on top of it, to be questioned. Like, I couldn't even talk to these people. I was sobbing so hard, I couldn't get words out. And they just kept saying, you know, like, do you recall dropping her? Do you recall hitting her head? Do you recall, like, did Creed accidentally do something? Like, they just were asking questions, right? About, like, when did this happen? Do you know how it happened? And I'm just telling them, I'm like, no, like, she's been in my sight connected to me since she's been home because number one, she hasn't been happy. And so she just constantly needs me. I breastfeed her all the time. So she's always with me. I hadn't been separated with her yet. And so, because they're like, well, did like grandparents have her for a little bit and maybe something happened there? I'm like, no, she's never left my side. And I'm like, and I would know, like, Creed's never been left alone with her yet. So, like, I would know if he dropped a toy on her head or accidentally fell on her head. And I'm like, also, because they made the comment, they're like, we totally understand that accidents happen. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, but I didn't have an accident. Like, I would remember if I hit her head on the doorway or if I dropped her for crying out loud. And so I just kept like, I was frustrated. I was hurt. I was just everything. And so it was so much, you guys. It was so much. Like, I'm trying to be there for Capri. I'm trying to comprehend what's happening. I'm being questioned, and we're like, are we gonna have, like, your mind right away goes to worst case scenario, and you're like, you're gonna be accused of something that you're not guilty for. And that was my biggest fear. And so I'll never forget in the last interview, it was like investigators or something like that. And they had like the recorder and everything going. And I'm like trying to talk to them and answer their questions as I'm sobbing. And finally, like one of the guys just goes, he asked like something about you don't recall an accident or something. And I finally looked at him and I was like, I wish I had something. I wish there was something. Like, I wish that there was a time that I hit her head so I could just tell you. And I said, it's frustrating for me not being able, because then they almost convince you that something did happen, right? Like, they're asking all these questions. And so then they're making you feel like you did do something. And so I'm just I'm rethinking every second with her in the last 30 days. And finally I looked at him and I was just like, I wish there was something, because then this would all be over with and we would stop being questioned and I would have an answer for you, but I don't have an answer. And I think he just like they were compassionate. They were compassionate. They were doing their job. So anyway, they tell us that in this time, Creed cannot, like, while we're being questioned and until they because I think a case was like opened, right? So like the second that they start to question you, there's technically like a case open or something like that. I don't know. And so anyway, they're like, until we close this case or until we confirm, Creed can't be left alone with you guys right now. And talk about an anger between Tyson and I that came out. Mind you though, like, Creed's not going to be left alone with us at this point because he's going to have to go with a family member while we try and get through everything going on with Capri. But just being told that did not sit well with us. And when we're so frustrated for being innocent and being accused of something, and then them, for one, we broke down when they told us this, and I looked at this lady and I just remember being like, you take our effing children and you take our freaking life. I said, we have one that's dying and you're going to take our other one. And she just looked at me and she goes, you could tell she was like a mom and she was compassionate and she was just trying to do her job. But she started tearing up and she just goes, we just have to do this. And I was just like, I was emotional. I was going on no sleep. And I was obviously raising my voice at her, but you could tell she was just like, looking back, I was like, geez, I feel bad. She probably didn't enjoy her job that day, but I just remember being like, how could you throw another dagger at us doing this? Don't you understand? Don't you have compassion? That's everything that was going through our head. So anyway, Creed was going home with family anyway while he wasn't there, actually. Creed was not even there at the time. He stayed back home with a family member. And so he wasn't even there, but they just told us, like, in the future, in the days to come, you just have to have a family member with him and you guys together. So for the next, so back to Capri. So the doctor comes in, and this is where, like, my parents had kind of updated, I think, a few relatives on what was going on. And there were prayer chains started immediately for her. And this is just where, like, God comes into the story full force. I just remember praying and pleading and praying and pleading and surrendering, and the only thing I could do at that point was to pray for a miracle. And I mean, the amount of prayers that went out in such a short a time for her shows you the power of prayer. And so I think it was like 24, I don't know, it's kind of a blur, 24 to 48 hours later, they come in and they look at us, and the doctor goes, "We have a miracle and we don't know how this happened. We're kind of in shock, but her clotting numbers are in normal range and we can put a drain in." That was a win in its, like, we were just like trying to process it in a way. We're like, what? Like, we got told that this was basically impossible. And so the guy comes in, he puts the drain in, and they said, now it's kind of a waiting game. Now we put this drain in, and eventually after a few days, we will start to wake her up. And that's kind of where decisions will be made. So they put the drain in. We wait, we pray, we wait, we pray. We're questioned more. And then they start to wake her up. And I remember just being so scared, because you don't know if there's been 100% brain damage. You don't know, like, they didn't know either. They're like, we don't know the extent of the brain damage. And so the only way to really know is just to slowly wake them up and see how they start to respond. So they slowly started to wake her up, and she opened her eyes and she looked at us. And over the next few days, she started to, like, move. And it was just little by little, she was showing us that she was there. And huge relief. And so then a few days later, Tyson's mom actually made the comment to me at we were at the hospital. And she goes, "Didn't she go to a chiropractor not too long ago? Like, could the bruises be from that?" Like, sometimes, I mean, the thing about it is, like, a baby to have a bruise, it doesn't have to be something hard. Like, the chiropractor could have simply just, pressed a little bit and she could have gotten a little bruise. So I went in and I called, I think it was CPS or something. I don't even know who was with who, but I told them they had Tyson pulled into this room. And when Tyson's mom said this, I quick ran into that room. I'm like, I just remembered something. I took her to a chiropractor because she's been so fussy that I thought maybe because a chiropractor helped Creed a lot. And so I was like, I took her to a chiropractor. Maybe that would be the answer to the little bruises on her back. And so then this lady was like, "This is huge, huge." And I'm like, yeah, like, I never even thought about it. But, like, that could be something that's what those spots are. Because they were concerned about the spots on her back. And that's, like, what, the bruises. And so then a few days goes by, and Capri's getting better and better. She's, showing no signs of brain damage yet. Like, they're doing small little tests with her, eye movement, everything like that. She's responding. And so then this part's kind of like a blur. Anyway, so I think at this point we're there like a week. And they finally get back to us and they're like, your case. So like we continued to have people come question us, pull us aside for probably a week. And finally, they could never give us an answer. And Tyson was just like very adamant and like on them. And he's like, what are you? I don't even know. But anyway, they came back and they said, your case is closed. Like, you know, it could have been because her clotting numbers are off, that her blood just created like these spots on her body. And they're like, we're ruling out, you know, anything with you guys. And so they're like, you know, your case is closed. You're good to go. And so, like that was a relief, obviously. And so then this is where like the dots start to connect. I think, right, like day 10 or 14, I don't know. We get moved down the hall because like it was getting super busy in there and they wanted us to switch rooms on the PICU floor. So we move rooms and we get to this new room and all of a sudden Capri's color, she turns pure yellow. Her eyes, her skin, everything. It was like an alarming, like in the snap of a finger. And I look at Tyson, I'm like, does her color look weird? And he was like, yeah. So we quick get the doctors and we're like, and nurses, and we're like, look at her color. She is pure yellow right now. So obviously they're like, something's not right. Let's run some blood tests. So they run all these blood tests. And now we have a new situation on our hands. So aside from like the brain bleed that they still have the EVD and it's an external ventricle drain, I think. They still have that in, draining the fluid because it needs to be clear and it still wasn't clear. So they still have that in. And then also they're trying to figure out why she's pure yellow. Days of testing, ruling out this, ruling out that, this, that. They finally come in and they're like, we think she might have something called biliary atresia. I've never heard of this before. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, the only way to know 100% if you have biliary atresia is by a surgery. We have to go in and we have to shoot a dye through her like liver or like through her intestines and then it like process. I don't know. They shoot a dye in somewhere and they watch the dye. It's called a HIDA scan. They watch the dye and they look and see if it goes through her bile ducts. And if it flows good, she doesn't have it. If it stops, then she has like a bile duct issue. And that's what biliary atresia is. And it's the only way to know. So they're like, we have to do the HIDA scan. So I'm researching. I get back in the room. I'm Googling biliary atresia, and that is where I struggled. I didn't realize what we were facing. Truly, it's like being told your child has a disease and you've never even heard of it. And then you start to research and you realize the severity of it. That it was a lot for me to process. And so they schedule her surgery. And then they also told us if it is confirmed that she has biliary atresia, we keep her opened up because they cut her abdomen open for this HIDA scan. And we like continue on while she's put under, and we do a 6-hour surgery where we connect her small intestine straight to her liver because that would mean she doesn't have bile ducts. So then we take this and it's like a temporary surgery. And we're like, okay, so I'm trying to research biliary atresia, get more familiar with it. And then, but they said there's also a chance she doesn't have this. So we were holding on hope that like they were going to come back and say the HIDA scan shows she has good flow. We're going to stitch her back up and she's good. But then also it was like, then we have to still figure out what's wrong, you know? So I don't know. We were just very confused at what we wanted. So surgery day comes, they take her, and talk about the longest day of my life. We sit there in the room. 4 hours later, they come in, and he confirmed that she had biliary atresia. And I think the diagnosis was just, it was hard. I cried all day. I couldn't stop crying. Like, I would stop and then I'd just start sobbing again because I had researched, and I'd researched that when you have biliary atresia, it's a lifelong liver disease, and she would need a liver transplant. And those words were so scary to me at that time. I felt like she would never, ever be able to be a normal child. I thought of just the littlest stuff. I just overthought everything. Like, she'll never be able to play sports. She'll never be able to have a baby. And I just asked myself, as a mom, how am I gonna be able to be strong enough when my daughter cries when she's, 16 years old and all of her friends are playing sports and she can't, or when she just longs to be a mother and she can't have kids, and just little things like that. I just overthought it so bad. And so they went on with the surgery. It was 8 hours later, I think, she came back. And that was hard to see. She had an incision the size of her whole abdomen from one side of the other. Obviously in a lot of pain. She's a 7-pound baby at this point. And she's just so tiny and skinny. She had lost a lot of weight being in the PICU. And so, yeah, we had a new diagnosis. But that confirmed. So the throwing up and the uncomfortableness, all that came from the brain bleed. The bloody nose was from the clotting disorder. The puking, the vomiting, that all comes from pressure in the head, vomiting. So I wasn't psycho. And then the spots on her body and the bruises and stuff all linked to biliary atresia, because your body and the brain bleed linked to biliary atresia. It's such a small chance. I only know one other mom who's reached out to me, and I'm in like a biliary atresia group, and it's got thousands of people in it. And I've had one other mom say to me, she like messaged me when I shared Capri's story in there, and she's like, I've never met anyone else who had a child who suffered a brain bleed from biliary atresia, but my son did. And so I only know one other personal story where a brain bleed has happened from biliary atresia, but there is, like, they are linked. And it's kind of crazy because my sister went and like was talking with this one girl, and she was telling this girl about Capri's story, and this girl was like a neuro something, or some kind of neuro doctor, and the doctor knew right away. She was like, oh yeah, her brain bleed from her biliary atresia. And Brooke's like, yeah, actually that is how that's like the link. And she was like, oh yeah, she's like, I've heard of that. So it is a thing, and she just happened to be a very few percentage who got the brain bleed from biliary atresia, because your liver processes all of your nutrients, and when your liver is not functioning properly, her body wasn't getting nutrients. So she wasn't getting vitamins, she wasn't getting minerals, she wasn't getting, like, her liver or her labs were so out of whack because her body wasn't processing like anything, and so her nutrients, like, she was nutrient deficient, which then led to all of that. So anyway, she had the Kasai surgery, and then Then eventually they tried to wean her off of her EBD, and they kept trying. They would like shut the drain off and see if if she could handle it off. And she kept going back and forth. They would do a lot of CT scans trying to like look at her ventricles. And sometimes they would look bigger, sometimes they wouldn't. They weren't sure if she needed them. So like you check, like you monitor her sleep, if she's agitated, her pupils, and then looking at ventricle size. That's all stuff that you kind of monitor. And hers was kind of like they weren't sure. She could go a little bit with it clamped, but then she'd have some signs, so then they'd turn it back on. And it was like 2 weeks back and forth of them trying to decide if she needed a permanent shunt or if they could take the drain out. So on top of this, you guys, so we have the brain bleed, we have the biliary atresia procedure, and then they're telling us she probably has to have a permanent shunt put in her brain from the brain bleed. So moral of the story is they thought that she could be without the EVD. She had passed. Okay. My phone died. And I was still blabbing, you guys, for like 20 minutes, and I didn't know my phone died. But I'm going to finish this up. So they didn't know if she would need the EVD. And so they actually took it out, thinking like, okay, she passed. And then Christmas Eve. So we got discharged 2 days before Thanksgiving. And then Christmas Eve, thanks to you guys on Instagram, I posted, it was like the day before Christmas Eve, I posted a picture of Capri. And some people on Instagram were like, you should have her eyes checked for sunsetting eyes. This is a neuro thing, and just want to make sure like your doctor is aware of it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this. And I looked it up and I was like, yeah, her eyes do kind of do that. So I sent videos and pictures to her neuro team, and I was like, people have brought up the thing about sunsetting eyes, and it looks like Capri has that. So I sent them videos, and they're like, yeah, we need to see you guys the day after Christmas. She'll probably need a shunt. And so Christmas Eve and Christmas Day were really hard for us. We were very emotional because here we thought we were like, done with hospital life, done with surgeries for a while, everything like that. We were so happy to be home and with family. And then we get told she's going to have a brain surgery the day after Christmas. And we just were so relieved, thinking like, she doesn't need the permanent shunt. It's one less thing like that we have to worry about with her and that she'll have to deal with for the rest of her life. And then hearing like, no, she's going to need the permanent shunt. It was just a lot for us to comprehend. So she had the permanent shunt surgery. So she has a permanent shunt. It'll be in there forever. You can't really tell if her head was shaved. You could see it, but it's on the inside, obviously, and then it runs down, and you can see the cord, or not the cord, the tube, like if she turns her neck. But basically, it runs the fluid that her brain can absorb up here, and it runs it down to her abdomen where it can be absorbed. So, but yeah. And also, while we were in the hospital, it was such a roller coaster. It was like we would have good news and have 3 good days and then a huge setback. And then she got a really bad brain infection. That was scary. It was bad. We like had infectious disease coming in and talking to us and talking about like she could have brain damage from this. Oh my God. It was on Halloween. And that was terrible. Luckily that cleared up good. And then she got a blood clot towards the end of our hospital stay from an IV. Her leg was like purple. We had to talk to hematology to figure out if that was like a disorder that she had or if it was just a fluke thing. Ended up being a fluke thing, thank goodness. So yeah, it was just a very emotional, obviously, journey, up and down and up and down and up and down. And I just remember feeling like I could never catch a break, or like she could never catch a break. It was like we would have good news and okay, we're out of this and all she's got to do is heal and get stronger, and then boom. It was just like, oh my gosh. So anyway, then let's see here. So with her liver, with the Kasai surgery, they don't know, there's not a rhyme or reason of how long it works with any child. It could last her 2 weeks, and then she would have to start doing a liver transplant process. It can last babies years, months, 2 years, 20 years. There's no say. There is, though, this is where God is in the story, I firmly believe, is that there's a 80% better success rate with the Kasai if it's done within the first 7 weeks of life. And because we were there with her brain problem, we were able to have that Kasai, or like we were able to have testing done, and then they did everything so fast that she had the Kasai in that first 7 weeks of life. It was right towards, like, we were in the 6th week when we had the diagnosis. So she made it just by a little bit. But, if we wouldn't have been there for the brain stuff, I don't know if we would have had that Kasai happen so quickly and the diagnosis so quickly, being an outpatient and testing. And like, we were just there where everything could happen, and the right doctors were there and things could just happen, boom, boom, boom. So that is just a huge God is in the story moment. And I just, looking back, I remind myself that everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. There was a lot of times where I question if we did the right thing, or if we were at the right place at the right time, or I should have done this and I should have done that. But looking back, I'm like, we were there when the certain doctor was on the certain shift, when the certain surgical person was at the person who was supposed to perform her surgery was there that day. And it just is, I firmly believe it happened exactly how it was supposed to happen. And I just have faith, like comfort in that. And then, so yeah, she'll need a liver transplant someday. There's a 4 out of 5 chance. We don't know when that is. We've been so blessed that she's been so healthy and thriving on just the Kasai so far. The goal with the Kasai is to get them by until they get a little bit bigger and stronger to go through the transplant process, because a lot of babies are diagnosed in the first 2 months of life, and that's a really big surgery, a liver transplant, to have when they're 2 months old. So the Kasai gets them by to hopefully get them bigger in order to go through that kind of surgery. So we've been blessed that she's had this much time to get bigger and stronger for a transplant. We're praying for more years of health. We pray for health every single day. I pray over her body every time I put her to bed. We just thank God for the health that we have been given and the way she's thriving, and we just don't take it for granted ever. And there also is a good chance that I could donate a piece of my liver and being a living donor for her when she does need that, because her and I have the same blood type. And if I go through the testing and get approved, then I could do that. And we'll see. Maybe not. Maybe I won't be her donor. Maybe God knows who that will be, and I have faith in that. But I do have to keep that in mind. And I strive to be healthy and, keep my liver in good shape, just in case I have to do that for her one day. And it would be, yeah, I'm not going to go into that, but God knows. I don't know if it'll be me, but that is something to take into consideration as a person who could possibly, do that for her. We met with her liver transplant team to meet them. A few months, it was like at the beginning of the year, and we actually went there for an evaluation for them to evaluate her to be put on the list. And they actually didn't do the evaluation because they said, basically she's too healthy to be evaluated to be put on a list. She's not sick enough to be on a transplant list yet. So we just have to see them once a year until things would start to decline. We still see her liver doctor that is, at the hospital that we were at, but her transplant team, we just see them once a year. And then her liver doctor, we see every 3 months. And she gets her blood drawn, and we monitor labs and her liver function and just her overall health, just so we can, watch the trend of that, and we'll know, so we can monitor when it starts to decline. She'll also show some physical signs. The whites of her eyes might just start to turn yellow. She'll be irritable, unhappy. There will be signs that her liver is starting to decline, but obviously the labs are the number one marker in that. So just kind of overall physical, how she's acting, lab work, that's what we're monitoring right now. A few things I just want to talk about as I finish this up is things that I walked away going through that, the good and the bad. The positive things, I guess you could say it's positive, is I don't think you realize what it does to you to be humbled to the extent that I have been humbled in a sense that, like, my mom made the comment, she would come visit me in the hospital and I was there with Capri, and she's like, there's just something different about you. Like, you've always been calm, but there's a different sense of calm. There's a whole new level of calm to you. And I was like, Mom, I've gone through the worst time of my life. I've gone through something that has changed me forever in a way that I've realized, and this is what just really, really hit me in those days, was that nothing else matters. Nothing. Take my house, take my car, take all the materialistic things I have. I don't care. Take them, as long as I can have my children and my husband and the people I love most here. As long as I can have them, I don't care about anything else. And I just remember thinking that, like, I became less materialistic. I cared about less. All I cared about was, like, you just want to hug your loved ones and never let them go. And that's all that matters to you. So that was something I've taken away from there, just a whole different perspective and outlook on that category in life. And then another thing is my Bible verse. I believe this is my Bible verse. I'm actually going to get a tattoo of it. Matthew 6:34. Like, people ask me, how do you not, like, stress about it and all that kind of stuff? And I didn't know how I was going to live life without just stressing so much and being emotional every day. And I've just learned Matthew 6:34. He tells us, be present in today. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. Today has enough worries of its own. Like, don't stress about what's going to happen, because you just need to focus on today and be present in the moment. And that's what I live by, especially with Capri. Like, we just focus on today. We count our blessings. We're thankful. We're grateful for where we're at. And I will cross that bridge when we get there and go through that hard time when it comes. But we just have to be focused on today and where we're at today and how she's doing today. And I try my hardest to focus on that. I firmly believe that. So one more thing before I finish with that. One thing that is negative is I've never, you know how we go through life and we hang on to memories, and memories are like, we pray and pray and pray that memories don't become blurry, right? We want to remember what our grandma sounded like and how she smelled and the memories we had with her and what she looked like and all those memories with her. We never want them to become blurry, right? Or the birth of our children. We never want to forget those little details, and we want them to stay as clear as they possibly can. And then we're just afraid that as we get older, we're not going to remember exactly how it was. And it's not going to, like, right? Like, we never want things to become blurry. I've never been in a situation where I wish things would be forgotten. So, like, I wish that I could absolutely take that out of my memory bank. Seeing her have seizures in my arms, seeing her in the hospital bed like she was, seeing the things that Tyson and I had to talk about and go through, and just there's so much of that is such a trauma that I would do anything to erase it from my memory. And it's just, yeah, I've never been in that position in my life where I truly wish that, and I'm okay, I'm okay in 20 years if I don't remember the details, because they're really, really, really hard for me, and they're so vivid yet, which it's only a year out, but man, they're vivid, and it's really, really hard to go back in those times. But with that being said, I wanted to share Capri's story, because Capri's miracle is something that you see in the Bible. It is a miracle that it's like too good to be true, when they came in and said her clotting, like, just everything, the no brain damage, her being able to have her clotting numbers come in normal range from being the farthest off the charts they've ever seen. She's a miracle. She's a true miracle. And I firmly believe that he kept her here to move big mountains in the future. I think that she is going to be one of the biggest disciples with her story. I think that she is going to use her story and her miracle that she got from God and just bring people closer to Jesus. And I want to be a helping hand in that by just reminding her whole life, what a miracle she is and what God did for her, and her story. And hopefully it's in her heart, and God, God knows, God has a plan for her. But I really think, and I have a really deep gut feeling that she will use her story in huge ways. And I hope that I can just be a proud mother watching that. But anyway, there's that. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. Thanks for sitting through some tears. And yeah, it was not an easy time. Lots of trauma still there. But you know what? One of my relatives, cousins, sent me a message in the hospital after we got the diagnosis that she had biliary atresia, and I was really struggling. And she said, Hailey, God made you her parents for a reason. You were made to be the people that walk her through this. And I screenshotted that, and I will never forget those words, because I had the biggest sigh of comfort in that message, reading that, and a huge eye opener. And those words meant everything to me. And now it's something I remind myself daily. I just tell myself, we were meant to walk by her side through this. God chose us for her. And having that perspective has changed everything. So I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We will see you next week.